You are listening to episode number 52 of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Today we're going to be talking about workbenches and what you should have on it. We're going to be talking about some upcoming events and contests, as well as some hamfests for the next 2 weeks, and wrap it all up with some news from around the hobby. And we have a small change in our normal episode, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. My name is Curtis, my call sign is Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, and I am your host for this podcast. This podcast is released every Thursday morning. Today we're going to be talking about workbenches and what you should have on them, or on yours, as at least a very beginning workbench, right? But I also have some changes that I want to talk to y'all about. Now, I've been thinking quite a bit about the Amateur Radio Club Spotlight. Now, I originally decided to do it because I wanted to kind of spread the word about clubs and stuff. But I haven't really had the participation that I thought I would. And it seems to be just the same thing over and over and over and over again. So I'm thinking that I'm going to drop that segment of the episode. Okay? I've made it all the way through every state. I've done a spotlight on the club in every state. And, you know, on the survey, the people that have taken the survey, as well as some email feedback that I've gotten, everybody says, okay, yeah, it's okay, or it's boring, or, you know, very few actually say that they really like it. So I think I'm gonna drop that segment. I don't know if I'm gonna put something else in it. I might, maybe in the future, maybe do like a little review segment of a piece of radio equipment or something like that. So that's a slight change that's coming on. And this episode is kind of a technological pain in the rear end for me. It seems like my internet's not working in my radio recording studio, even though I went out and bought a Wi-Fi repeater thinking that I could do that and it would extend the range to my house, or from my house to my workshop. It's not that far, but for some reason my repeater's just not working. I mean, I'm getting the signal, but for some reason it's not connecting to my router inside my house. So I can't get it on my computer. And typically, you know, I do all my notes and stuff on Google Docs. And typically what happens is, even if I don't have internet connection, I can still access the information, right? Well, today when I opened up my computer and logged in, it said there was no files. I don't know why. And I don't have internet, so I can't log in. So I'm reading everything off my phone, which is a lot different. But anyways, I am working on changing up a little bit. I have a old Windows XP Dell desktop that I originally had planned on using as my recording computer out here in my shop. Unfortunately, the slowness of it and the oldness of it and the let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? The dirtiness, maybe, of the operating system. So trashed up and everything from years of use and then not use, it just got really, really, really slow. So I had the bright idea of downloading Debian, which is a Linux based operating system. Well, I got it downloaded. I got it installed. But it seems to be quite a learning curve to do anything. So I'm going to have to do a whole lot more research on what and how to do things. You know, the very first thing, I got the program installed. It's got a whole bunch of really neat stuff on it. And I downloaded the ham radio version of it that I heard over at, I believe it was on the episode of Ham Radio 360 where Kel had the Linux and the Ham Shack group or podcast on. and they told everybody about a version of Linux that has a whole bunch of ham radio stuff on it, and there's other packages that you can download that has, like logging and remote control and digital communications and education, a whole bunch of stuff that you can download. I just got the basic one. It was like 1.6 gigabytes or something like that. It took me like most of the day at work one day to download, but I finally got it installed on my computer, and I went to try and install Audacity, which is the program that I use to record all my podcasts on, and I can't figure out how to do it. So if any of y'all out there are Linux users and have this program, if you can kind of like maybe shoot me an email and say, hey, this is how you install Audacity in there, that would be super great. So if you do, please shoot me an email and say, this is how you do it. The other thing I wanted to mention, last episode I announced the winners of the giveaway things. I have yet to hear anything back from any of y'all. Any of the 5 people that were selected as winners. I haven't heard anything back from any of y'all. So I will put it in the show notes. I don't have it in front of me. Like I said, I'm having some technical issues in this episode, but I don't have the winners in front of me. But please, if you are the winners, I send out an email to everybody on my list of who the winners were, reminding everybody to send me an email. In last week's episode, we talked about it. Send me an email, confirm your address. And again, I'm going to say it again. If you were selected as a winner in last week's episode, please send me an email, k5clm@everythinghamradio.com. Confirming your address, or if you want to just say, my information is correct on QRZ, that would be awesome, and then I can get that situated. I am also going to try and find the email on my actual email list to send y'all a direct email. So I guess that's pretty much it. Like I said, we are going to be talking about what is a good thing to have on a workbench. And this is basically just a basic entry level what you should have. Now, I'm not going to be talking about like oscilloscopes or test probes, all the high dollar stuff. I'm talking about just a general basic entry level thing that you should have for your workbench, for working on electronics, for working on coax, for general ham radio stuff. And I actually talked with George over at packtender.com, that is one of the co-hosts of the Ham Radio 360 Workbench podcast, and kind of compared notes with him, and he pretty much said what I figured out. What I have in mind on my workbench / go bag type thing. My go bag is not the normal go bag like a lot of the typical meaning of go bag is now. Mine is more of a electronics based on things like what I need in the field, like pliers and soldering iron and stuff like that. So, but anyways, in this episode we're going to talk about that, and I've got some really neat things. So please make sure that you check out the show notes of today's episode. The show notes are released at the same time as the episodes are. I had one person say that I need to release them sooner than the episodes come out, but they are there. You can go online and look at the notes while you're listening to the podcast if you'd like. And you can find this episode at everythinghamradio.com /podcast /52. And there's a whole bunch of stuff on there. There's a whole bunch of links. And I will say this right up front. All the links that I have for all the tools and stuff are affiliate links. I will get a small commission, little finder's fee type thing from Amazon. All the links go to Amazon. So without further ado, let's talk about what I think you should have on your workbench. First and foremost, you probably need, well, maybe not first and foremost, but first off, we're going to talk about pliers. Now, there's several types of pliers that I think you should have on a workbench, right? The first thing you need is needle nose pliers. Now, the reason that you should have a pair of needle nose pliers is because they're smaller than regular pliers. They're longer. They're skinnier. They can get into where a full-on big set pliers can't. And these work great for things like, holding the end of a resistor or capacitor or some kind of component that you're trying to put on a circuit board. They're great to hold those down while you solder them or get them into place or whatever. They also have little cutters on the side that you can use to cut with, but we're going to talk a little bit more about cutters here in just a little bit. But you do need a good set of needle nose pliers or long nose pliers, as sometimes they're called. They are, like I said, they're very skinny, very long, and they're great for getting in small places. The one that I have in my go bag, or my mobile workbench, if you will, are the Irwin Vice Grip long nose pliers. These are very well made, very durable. I've had the pair of pliers that I have now for probably 10-12 years or so, and they're still just chugging along and never skipping a beat. They're made of very durable nickel chromium steel construction. They have very soft grips that provide extra comfort for you, so you don't have the hand fatigue. They're very, like I said, they're very well durable pliers, and they stay sharp very long on the cutting part of it. Now, on top of the regular needle nose pliers, the straight ones that you typically think about, I also recommend that you get one that has a bent nose. Now, I have also one of these, and also an Irwin Vice Grip pliers. They're called bent long nose pliers. They're great because not only do you have the skinniness and the smallness of the needle nose pliers, but at the end of it kind of hooks. It kind of bends, and that's great for like getting under things or getting around corners or something like that. Or maybe you're trying to do 3 things at once, and you have to hold something and hold your solder and hold your soldering iron or whatever. They're great because you don't have to hold them so far sideways. You can actually hold them straight up and down, and it'll like bend around and hold whatever you're holding. So I would recommend having that, but at the very least, get you a regular, standard, straight needle nose pliers. Now, the other thing I would definitely say you need some kind of just regular pliers also. Those are the slip joint pliers, like the typical, if you remember your grandfather carrying, my grandfather carried them all over the place with him. He had the full-on coveralls and the little pockets and stuff, and the carpenter pants that you see that are so big nowadays. Those pockets on the side were made for pliers, right? Hammer on one side, a plier, and a screwdriver on the other, or something like that. But those things they're great for the bigger things, for tightening down a nut, or for holding a piece, a connector while you're trying to solder on a coax. Those are great to have. And they're typically for the bigger jobs, for the more robust jobs, I guess you could say, not the delicate work that you would use for the needle nose pliers. But again, I have the Irwin Vice Grip slip joint pliers in my go bag. The next thing that I highly recommend you have is a pair of wire cutters, or sometimes they're also referred to as diagonal cutters. Again, I bought this complete set that had the needle nose pliers, the bent nose pliers, the wire cutters, the regular pliers, and wire strippers in one complete package when I bought these things. So they're all Irwin Vice Grip cutters or products. But they're great. I highly recommend these things. Now, what the wire cutters or the diagonal cutters are, they're used for things like, cutting off leads off the back of a circuit board. After you have all the components in place, you have them all soldered, you need some way to cut them off. Now, you can use like the needle nose pliers or something. They have cutters on the side, but they're long and they're obstructive, or I guess maybe that's the word I'm looking for. They're not as precise as actual wire cutters. So I recommend you getting some of those, some diagonal cutters. They're typically, the cutter part is like maybe 1/2 inch long or something like that. And they're great for cutting, cutting wires or cutting the leads off of a component or whatever that you're working on a DIY project. So definitely get a pair of these as well. These are one of the must-haves. The other thing that you probably should have, but you don't have to have it, but it would make your whole life a whole lot easier, trust me on this, is a pair of wire strippers. Now, the wire strippers, they're a lot more robust when it comes to being able to strip wires. And by strip wires, I'm talking about, stripping the sheathing off of a wire. And this can be anything from a 24 gauge wire up to a piece of coax or something like that. Now, the wire strippers probably won't be a good thing to use for a piece of coax, but you could, I guess, if you wanted to. Now, with the wire stripper, they typically have like 3 different sections. They have the red, the blue, and the yellow marked actually on the stripper, so what. If you look at the gauge wire, typically those are the colors that they use for the larger ones, or at least the barrel connectors and stuff. But you can use the color coded portion also as crimpers. The wire stripper that I have is, of course, the Irwin ones. And I have a picture on my website of the one that I actually have. One like I have, not the actual one that I have. And it doubles not only as a cutter or a stripper, but it also has a section on the thing where you can cut wires. And it has a crimper where you can crimp on things like spade lugs or barrel connectors and stuff like that. So, again, I highly recommend the Irwin ones. They are very well constructed. And like I said, I've had mine 10, 12 years, and they're still going strong. Now, one thing I saw while I was doing all my figuring out, researching, and stuff like that for this episode was a new stripper. Well, not necessarily a new one, but it's a self-adjusting stripper. And these would be really nice to have if they work. I read a whole bunch of the reviews and stuff for this one, for the Irwin one, and has very high reviews, high marks, like 4.7 stars or something like that on Amazon. So they seem to work really nice. I would have to try them. I had one at one point in time, way back when, that was supposed to be a self-adjusting one. It wasn't. Well, it was, but it didn't work with the flip. And it broke on me like the first time I used it. But this one is very high, made very strongly. And it's supposed to work from anything from 10 to 22 gauge insulated wire, 10 to 22 non-insulated wire, 7 to 9 millimeter ignition terminals. You can use them for speaker wires. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can use. And also, on top of that, all these products have a lifetime guarantee. So if they break or whatever, you can get them replaced. Now, I sound like a commercial for Irwin, and I'm sorry about that, guys. But, these are the ones that I use. These are the ones that I highly recommend. So these are the ones I'm going to talk about. There are others, but, these are the ones I'm talking about. So I think we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to hear from our sponsor before we go on with our topic. So let's hear about West Mountain Radio, our sponsor for this podcast. All right, so I would like to thank West Mountain Radio for coming on as my very first sponsor of my podcast. I've used the equipment that West Mountain Radio puts out now for probably, 18 years or so, 15 plus years for sure. I have a Rig Blaster. I believe it was like a Rigmaster 2, I think is what I have. I don't have it here in front of me. It's still packed up with all the other ham radio stuff that I have not got put up at my new place yet. But anyways, these things are very nice. You can use them, the Rig Blaster, you can use them to do announcements for your club meeting. You can do them for a temporary repeater controller. Hook 2 radios up to them and away you go with a mobile repeater. You can use them for digital modes like FSK, what is it, FSK31? No, PSK31. You can use it for RIDI. You can use it for FL Digi. There's so much uses for these Rig Blaster things. And not only that, but you can use them as just a microphone switch. You know, if you want to go between a CW key and your microphone, they'll act as like a go-between. And, you know, press a button and you're using your key. Press another button, you're using your mic. Or if you have two separate mics, you know, a desktop mic and a handheld mic, you can also do that. So, super great things to do. Also, they make rig runners. Rig runners we've talked about a couple times in the past episodes. Basically what they are is a power distribution system, right? You come in with one big wire from your battery, typically like 40 amp wire, and they break off into several branches that have 10 and 20 amp fuses. I think there's even some that have 30 amp fuses for in each individual line. So you come in with one big gauge wire into the cab of your truck or into your workstation off your battery, and you can go with smaller gauge wire to your radio, to your to your whatever. So great things to have, especially in mobile setups. And the other thing that I found out here recently is they have a thing called a DC to go box. These things are great little things. I don't have one of these actually to go box things, but I've kind of made my own in a roundabout way. You know, they're basically hard plastic cases that you put a battery in, and they mount a super power gate PG40 on the side, and also a rig runner 4007U or a 4008, or you can custom build whichever one you want, however you want to use it. First off, the super power gate PG40 basically acts as an uninterruptible power supply. You know, in case you lose power, it'll automatically switch over to battery, or if your battery goes low, it will automatically kill the feed to your radio so you don't damage it. Now, the other thing that they have two of them that are pre-built, I guess you could say, that are super great. One of them has the Rig Runner 4008. It has 40 amps in. It has 8 plugs, or 8 slots of output that goes out. Each one of them are fused, right? Then they have the 4007U, which also has 40 amps in, but only has 7 slots out. Now, there is some extra features that come along with this. It has a digital load meter, so you can tell how much amperage or how much load is on your rig runner, and also has USB charging ports, solid state push button on-off switch, and automatic shut-off for high and low voltages. So all these things are super great, super easy. So definitely make sure you head on over to West Mountain Radio and check those out. You also get a free gift if you use a coupon code that you only hear on the Everything Ham Radio podcast. And that is, you can use the code of EHP17, and you will get a free USB power monitor. Okay. If you want to know what that is, head on over to everythinghamradio.com/WMR, West Mountain Radio, WMR. And that'll take you to there where you can check out those two things as well as the free gift that you get. Alright, so let's talk a little bit more. This thing here is probably the most important thing that you will have on your, well, maybe first, maybe second, anyways, on your workbench. And that's a soldering iron. You know, you're going to be using this a lot, right? You know, you're going to be using it for soldering components. You're going to be using it for soldering coax, you know, all these different things. So you really need a good one, right? Now, the one that I have actually got when I was in college, some 20 years ago or so, I guess now. And it's not the greatest. You know, it's basically just a plain Jane soldering iron. Now, some people say that a soldering gun is a good way to go, and that's could be true, especially using the higher thickness coax. But for delicate work, for the PC boards or projects that you're going to be doing, you don't want to use a soldering gun. You want a soldering iron. And I found a really neat one on Amazon, and there's a link, like I said, in the show notes of today's episode. And it actually has a full kit. It has 7 pieces that come with it. And it is a 60-watt, 110-volt adjustable temperature electric welding soldering iron. And it has 5 tips that come with it as well. The soldering iron itself has a dial on it that you can change anywhere from 200 to 450 degrees Celsius. This kit is really neat. Not only does it have the soldering iron, but it comes with a stand, a ring stand that you put the thing in, the soldering iron in, and it holds it up out of the way. And it has a sponge that's on the bottom that you can wipe your soldering iron off with. So that's definitely a must-have. It has a solder sucker to use to get those stray pieces of solder off your board. It has a package of solder. It has anti-static tweezers, which are great to have as well. And like I said, this thing is really great. It has 29 out of 30 reviews on Amazon. They're at 5 stars. The last one, I believe, was like a 4-star, I think. Like I said, it comes with 5 tips for the soldering iron. Everything from a wider flat blade all the way down to a fine tip thing. So this kit is very nice to have. It's like $30, I think, and it comes with all this. Basically everything you need for your soldering station. It has your solder, your soldering iron, your sucker, your piece of tweezers, a sponge, all that. So I recommend that one as well. It was probably the best one that I found for the price, and it got some great reviews. Now, along with the soldering iron, you're going to need some kind of solder, right? Now, typically, in years past, the typical solder, or the universal solder that you use, was a rosin cord lead-based solder. Now, make sure that you get a rosin base. There's actually 2 types of solder, a rosin base and an acid base. You don't want to get the acid base because you'll really mess up your project if you do. So definitely get the rosin base. That's what's made for electronics, right? Now, on top of that, you have your lead-based and your lead-free solder, okay? Now, like I said, the universal one before was lead-based. It was basically 60% tin and 40% lead. And it had a melting temperature of about 180, 190 degrees or so. However, they've come to the conclusion that the fumes that are let off on solder, on the lead-based solder, can make you sick. So it's kind of transitioning over to use the lead-free one. It doesn't have any lead in it, and its melting temperature is higher. And I believe it's like, I want to say it's, like 220 degrees, I think, is what the melting point is for the lead-free one. But you don't have all those nasty fumes coming off it, right? Yeah, okay. I'll let the bureaucrats have that. Okay, next thing that you need, and this is probably the other most important part, is a multimeter. You need some kind of digital multimeter. I found a couple of them on Amazon, one of which I have, one of which I don't, and that's basically because of the price. But it is probably the best multimeter you can buy. The one that I have is the Proster Pocket Digital Multimeter. And it has automatic range finding, so you basically could turn it to AC or DC current. You have continuity testing, alarm type thing. You test it, and if it connects together, it sends off a little buzzer. It has a transistor tester. It has several features on there, and very nice meter, very accurate as far as I can tell. And it's like, I want to say $20, $30, something like that. Very neat little thing. Now, the one that I don't have is a Fluke brand of meter. I have a link on the show notes to this one, probably the cheapest one I found, and it's a Fluke 115 compact true RMS digital multimeter, and it runs about $180. very expensive, but like I said, probably the best meter that you can buy on the market today. So, need a multimeter because you're going to be testing circuits. You're going to be, tracing down voltages to make sure you have things put the right way or in the right order or right place. You're going to be testing for continuity, all those things. So, you definitely, a meter is a must-have. Digital is probably the way to go, especially nowadays with all the stuff that's going on. If you have to have an analog, by all means, have an analog. Just have a meter. It's one of those things that you really need to have. Next thing, a X-Acto knife. Now, this probably isn't the most important thing that you're going to have, but it's nice to have around, and they're cheap. They're like $5, right? You can get them at Walmart or Hobby Lobby or Michael's or something like that. And you can use these for cutting prints out, or maybe even using for cutting the sheathing off a wire if you really have to in a tight fit. But X-Acto knife, good to have. Like I said, not a must-have, but it's good to have. A screwdriver set. Now, I'm not talking about those that you have on your wall of your workshop or in your toolbox in your truck or whatever. I'm talking about the precision ones. Now, the ones like you would use for a to fix the screw in your glasses, or to screw in a screw to hold your circuit board in place. The smaller screws, the more precise ones. Definitely want to have one of those. It doesn't have to be the super expensive one. I've got a couple suggestions on the show notes of today's episode that have a wide variety of screwdrivers in it. One of them actually has the individual screwdrivers with the different sizes. The other one has like bits that you can use with the bigger handled thing. Okay, next thing it's good to have is a variable voltage power supply. Now, in years past, these were on the more expensive end, and the average Joe Blow probably didn't have something like this. They had to go a roundabout way of, going into a step-down transformer or, some kind of voltage drop before they got to their circuit. Because, nowadays you have things that take 3 volts, 3.5 volts, 5 volts, 12 volts, 24 volts, 30 volts, whatever. But a variable voltage power supply is good to have, and they're relatively cheap. I've got a couple of them on here. One of them has a analog meter, the other one has a digital meter, and they're, I think, like $30, something like that. So the price has gone way, way, way down. There are more expensive ones out there, ones that have 2 or 3 outputs and separate voltage controls for each one of them, but you really don't need that. Just one of them is fine. The couple that I have, they go from 2.2 volts to 15 volts at 2 amps. And like I said, they're like $20-$30, I think, something like that. So that'll typically handle or give you the power that you need for any of your projects that you're doing. Okay, one more thing. We actually got 2 more things I want to talk about. First off, a helping hands. Now, these things, actually, there's 3 more things, I guess. Helping hands. For those of y'all that don't know what these are, they're basically a circuit board helper, okay, if you will. Okay, they have a solid, heavy base. They have 2 arms that come out with alligator clips on them that you can clip your circuit board on with, and typically you have a magnifying glass as well that goes in it. So you can solder those little teeny little pieces. These are great to have to solder with, especially because you have a soldering iron in one hand, solder in the other hand, and it's easier if you have it tilted up at like a 45-degree angle when you're trying to solder this rather than laying flat on a board or something like that. So helping hands, pretty cheap. I think they're like $10-15, something like that. And great addition. Next thing, jumper wires. You're going to need jumper wires. Now, not only with just a typical small gauge wire for jumping power from your battery to your circuit, But you also want one with like alligator clips. You know, have alligator clips on both ends of it, where you can hook it to a battery terminal, hook it to your thing really fast to check and see if it's going to work right for you. You know, or the circuit's going to go and it's not going to smoke or whatever. So, jumper wires with alligator clips. You also could possibly have the regular or standard jumper wires without the clips. Small piece of wire, whatever, jumper wires for like a breadboard application to figure out your circuit beforehand. Those are good to have, and they're relatively cheap. Okay, last thing that I want to talk to you about is lighting. You definitely got to have really good lighting in your work area, right? Because you got to have these little bitty circuit boards, you're going to have these little bitty components, you're going to have these little bitty soldering pads, so you need good light to see, right? You know, on top of your magnifying glass in your helping hands, or one that's mounted to the wall or something like that you can look through to solder with, you gotta have some kind of good lighting in order to be able to see. Now, I ran across this thing, just kind of stumbled on it, and that's actually what prompted this episode on YouTube one day. And the video is embedded in the show notes, so definitely make sure that you check out the show notes of today's episode. There's a lot of information on there that you really should see, especially in the lighting section of the show notes, because this thing is really neat. It's made with a thin piece of aluminum and LED lighting, and it has a variable power supply built into it. And the way that this guy did it, he took this small thin piece of aluminum, he glued the white LED lighting to the underside of it, and made it like an arch that goes over his work area. And it has a dial on it so you can make it brighter or dimmer or whatever that you want to do. But this thing is really neat, and it's, you know, relatively cheap, because these little, you know, the white LED rolls you can buy for like $20 and make like 10 of these pretty much. But check out the video. Great thing to have, and a nice little first project for your workbench if you haven't done one already. And even if you have, super easy to make. A couple soldering joints and some hot glue to glue on your thing. So that pretty much wraps up what I can think of. If any of y'all have anything else that y'all think should be on a beginner's workbench, or even maybe a little advanced workbench, but typically the beginning one is what I want to talk about. But if I missed anything, leave a comment in the show notes of today's episode, and let me know, and let everybody else know, or leave a comment in the group. And I didn't mention where all these are, so I'll mention that here in just a minute. But yeah, so if y'all think of anything that I forgot, definitely share it with everybody else, so we can get, you know, a good thing here going. Yeah, so that pretty much wraps up that part. So let's talk about some upcoming events. Okay, so the events that are coming up, again, all of the times I'm going to be saying are in Zulu time, and I'm not saying the weekly ones anymore. I'm just going to do the main ones. So here we go. On January the 20th, from 1800 to 2200 hours, is the LZ Open contest. On January 21st, from 1200 hours to 11:59 on the 22nd, is the Hungarian DX contest. From January 21st at 1800 hours to the 22nd at 5:59 is the North American QSO party on single sideband. January 21st from 1900 to 2300 hours is the WAB 1.8 MHz phone contest. January 21st from 1900 to the 23rd at 3:59 is the ARRL January VHF contest. The next thing is the Feld Hell Sprint, and that is several different areas. The January 21st from 2000 hours to 23:59 in Europe and Africa. On the 21st from 2300 to the 22nd at 23:59 is Eastern North America and Eastern South America, I believe. And the 22nd from 2 to 5:59 is Western North America, Asia, and I'm not sure what the OC stands for. On the 25th, from 0 hours to 200 hours is the SKCC sprint. January 22nd, the 27th, from 2200 hours to the 29th at 2200 hours is the CQ 160 meter contest on CW. The 28th, from 0 hours to 2400 hours is the Montana QSO party. So all y'all those in Montana, make sure you participate in that. January 28th, from 600 hours to the 29th at 1800 hours is the REF contest on CW. The 28th, from 1200 to the 29th at 1200 is the BARTG RTTY sprint. Also on the 28th, from 1300 to the 29th at 1300 is the UBA DX contest on single sideband. And last but definitely not least, on the 28th, from 1900 hours to the 29th at 1900 hours is Winter Field Day. Now, if y'all remember last episode, we talked about Winter Field Day. It's coming up really fast, and those DC to go boxes are great to have for that contest. All the information that was mentioned in this segment was received or was gotten from the WA7BNM contest calendar. Alright, so next up we're going to be talking about some hamfests that are coming up. On the 20th, which is this weekend, we have the North Texas Section Convention, the Cowtown Hamfest in Forest Hill, Texas. Right at the red for me, unfortunately. I'm working yet again this year, so I'm not going to be able to make it. Sucks. Okay. Anyways, the Southwest Florida Regional Hamfest in Fort Myers, Florida. On the 21st, we have the Georgia Aries Convention in Forsyth, Georgia, Forsyth, something like that. The Hammond Hamfest in Hammond, Louisiana. The Harrisburg Radio Amateur Club Winterfest in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And Winterfest 2017 in Whitman, Maine. Or is it Massachusetts? MA. I hate this when my mind goes blank and I don't remember what the abbreviations for M's are. And that was actually one of the things that somebody mentioned in a survey question. Remembering those abbreviations. Shame on me for not doing my homework a little bit better. Okay, so on the 22nd, which is on Sunday, is the Quartz Fest in Quartzsite, Arizona. And also the WCRA's 50th annual Midwinter Hamfest in St. Charles, Illinois. The following weekend, on the 27th, is the Mississippi State Convention Capital City Hamfest in Jackson, Mississippi, and also the Puerto Rico State Convention in Hatillo, Puerto Rico. On the 28th, we have the 2017 Albuquerque Winter Tailgate in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the DeSoto County Hamfest in Arcadia, Florida, Lockport Amateur Radio Hamfest in Lockport, New York, the SARC Winterfest in Marathon, New York, Winterfest in Collinsville, Illinois, the HPARC Swap in Madison Heights, Michigan, and the MMARC Post-Holiday Hamfest in Denton, Maryland. And last but not least, we have the Tesco Amateur Radio Club Hamfest in Stratford, Ohio. All the information on this segment was taken from the ARRL Hamfest calendar, so head on over there for more information of other Hamfests. Okay, so in our news section, I got a couple little things I want to talk about, but I'm going to be a little different than I normally do. I'm not going to read them word for word. I read an article on the ARRL newsfeed that was on the 12th, and it was entitled, Illegal Drone Transmitters Could Interfere with Air Traffic Control. ARRL Complaint Asserts. For all y'all drone pilots out there, you might want to listen up and you might want to read this, so you can head on over to the ARRL and check it out, or in the show notes of today's episode. One of the audio-video transmitters that are being sold now uses part of the amateur radio frequency. Now, there's just one channel that uses the amateur radio frequencies, and they're actually marketing this as a amateur radio transmission, right? And the frequencies that they use are between 1010 and 1280 megahertz. These are on the same frequency as some air traffic control equipment, and it could potentially cause some major interruptions in services for some air traffic control things. So that's definitely not something that would be very good. Now, the ARRL has mentioned this, and it's actually the Lawmate transmitter and companion 6-watt amplifier is the actual transmitter that uses these, and you can buy them for less than $100, but it doesn't have any kind of FCC identification number on it, so it's probably not legal to use here in the United States. Now, the target market of these devices are, for drone hobbyists, not licensed amateurs. The device, it basically has no valid amateur radio application, right? That's what the FCC, or that's what the ARRL told the FCC. So, I hate it when companies do this, when they try and use us as amateur radio operators as a selling point on something that shouldn't be done. Something that's not legal to have, right? So, yeah, there you go. All y'all drone pilots, make sure you're not using this type thing. Okay, so next up, we're going to be talking about the Nebraska Sesquicentennial Celebration QSO Party, set up for February and March. And this article came out on the 13th on the ARRL newsfeed. Radio amateurs in Nebraska will celebrate the state's 150th anniversary during the Sesquicentennial Anniversary Celebration QSO Party, starting on Saturday, March 25th, and continuing to Sunday, March 6th. This time period includes the actual anniversary date, which is March 1st. It says that Nebraska amateurs may operate their own stations or as part of the Nebraska Historical Site Activation, appending /NE150 to their call sign. They actually set up a Facebook page. There is a link to it in the show notes under the news section, so make sure you'll check the Facebook page out. Basically what they're looking for is the transmit name, signal report, and the county or historical site if appropriate. In non-Nebraska stations, you can participate as well. Again, you transmit name, signal report, and state or provenance or DXCC entity. Special QSL cards will be available with a self-addressed stamped envelope and QSL to the Nebraska station contacted, so directly to that person. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, Texas had our sesquicentennial like shortly before I was born. I want to say 1778, I believe, or no, 1978. 17. Whew, I'm not that old. Anyways, 150 years for Nebraska. Congratulations for all y'all Nebraskians, whatever that may be. Yeah, 150 years, that's a great accomplishment. So check that out and help them celebrate their sesquicentennial. Okay, so next up, this story that I read really warmed my heart. And it is the Maximum Memorial Station W1AW receives equipment donations from Hill Sound and Radio Haas America. This one was on the 13th as well. Now, the Maximum Memorial Station W1AW, they received they received a Gold Grill PR781G studio microphone, a PR40 Gold microphone, a couple of Pro 7 DY headsets in pink and red, a PS Elite 6 Pro Set Elite headset with HC6 element, three FS3 single foot switches, 2 topless microphone booms, and replacement Pro Set Plus cord and PS3 cables. The manager, Joe Garcia, said most of the gear will repair or replace items at the station that have seen a lot of visitors use over the years. W1AW also received a call site lighted call sign display from Aaron Hubich Neto, PY2QI/KK4CGD at Radio House America in Brazil. Remote control allows the user to change the display color as well as color flashing or strobing display mode. Garcia says, "We are extremely grateful for Bob Hill and Aaron Neto for their generous donations." Now, last but not least, I'm going to switch my screens here because for some reason it's not coming up. One of the things that I saw just come up here recently is a article about the Amateur Radio Parity Act. Now, if y'all remember, last year we had the whole big old hubbub about the Amateur Radio Parity Act and what it did. You know, basically it allowed amateurs that are in a HOA to put up antennas, right? And it's not those that are like, you know, massive antenna structures and huge beams and stuff like that. It's more geared for a simple, non-intrusive, vertical antenna, a long wire, a dipole, stuff like that. Smaller ones. It's not for those that are the big, gigantic ones, like a lot of HOAs were afraid of. Now, if you remember, last year the HR 1301 passed through Congress unanimously, I believe, and it had something like 126 co-sponsors or something like that. And it made it to the Senate, and it basically failed there due to not bringing it to the floor, I think, before the session expired for last year. So it has been reintroduced now, and it is HR 555, the new Amateur Radio Parity Act bill. It was introduced into the U.S. House of Representatives. The bill language is identical to that of HR 1301, like I said, which passed last summer, but failed to win in the Senate. So it's back up there. It still needs our support, so make sure you get a hold of your state representative in the Senate and your House representative. Make sure that it passes this time around so we don't get another stalemate, I guess you could say. So yeah, definitely check that out. And that pretty much wraps up, I think, what I'm going to talk about in this episode. So so thank y'all all for listening, and let's see if we can wrap this up. Okay, so before I let y'all go, and before y'all turn this episode off, and hopefully you've listened to this point, I wanted to kind of give y'all kind of a heads up of what I said a couple episodes ago. You may remember a couple episodes ago, I believe it was right before Christmas I talked about it. Maybe it was the first episode this year. About the big freeze that we had here in Texas and how, like, all of my pipes burst. Was not fun. I did get everything fixed. We do have water again, thank goodness. I would hope so after like 3 weeks, right? But anyways, I've been working the past 2 weeks on getting my house, I guess maybe better insulated, but I got all the underpinning on of my new house, and it looks great. We put all green metal underpinning. I actually had like 4 sheets left over from the porch that I built on the back of my house. It has a full roof over it, and we use 18-foot pieces of metal for the roof. And I had like 4 pieces left over because I actually got a couple extras that I didn't order, so don't tell nobody about that, okay? Anyways, I had 4 pieces left over. I ended up having to buy like 8 more, which wasn't bad. And I actually came out with, after I had got everything done, I went all the way around my house, all the way around the 16 by 30 porch that I have on my back porch. Got all the way around it, and had like 4 pieces left. And these pieces I'm talking about are like 2 inches wide. I think there's like 2 inch wide and 3 inch wide. So it worked out really, really, really great. So it looks great. And now I don't have to worry about my pipes freezing anymore. So thank goodness on that. I still don't have my ham station set up. Unfortunately, I am working on getting my computer set up again. I'm installed Linux on my computer. So hopefully by the time I record next episode, I'll have that. Again, if any of y'all out there know Linux and know how to install Audacity on it, please shoot me an email and tell me how. I would greatly appreciate it. Like verbatim instructions, do this, click here, go there, type this, whatever. Because I've never used Linux at all. Let's see, what else? There was something else that I was going to tell y'all, and it just like totally slipped my mind. Last episode I mentioned that I actually got my RSS feed to include the last 50 episodes rather than the last 10. I didn't realize that I only had 10 episodes on my RSS feed that goes to iTunes and Stitcher Radio and Google Play and all that. I didn't realize that. I opened it up and oh my goodness, I have had such a influx of listeners listening to previous episodes. It just astonishes me. I mean, here it is. I'm recording this, and it's the 16th of January, and I'm already at the number 3 spot on total downloads per month. I told you last episode where that was the record month in December, and it was like 6,200 downloads, I want to say. I'm already at 6,000, guys. I had 4,000 downloads in the first week of January. So thank y'all all for listening. Thank y'all for going back over all my previous episodes, and hopefully all those previous episodes don't turn y'all off. I mean, I've come a long ways in this podcast rather, and I still have a long ways to go. I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to talk and not say ums and uhs and all that good stuff. And I just did it again. So please continue to listen to my podcast. Please share it with your friends. Also, please follow me on Facebook. You can find me at facebook.com/everythinghamradio. Also have a group that I wish I would have started instead of the page. It typically allows you to communicate better with me and with other people. And you can find that at facebook.com/groups/everythinghamradio. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/everythinghamradio. I'm on Twitter at K5CLM. And a couple other social media places that I post to and not very active on. You can find those on the social menu on the website. If you like what you heard here, please share it with your friends. Please subscribe to my podcast and give me a star rating or an honest review, or honest review. Really helps me out. Whatever you listen to, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, wherever, please share it with your friends and review it. If you would like to support this podcast financially, there are several ways you can do it. You can do it with a one-time donation through PayPal. There's a link on the bottom of the show notes, as well as you can go to the support page at everythinghamradio.com/support. You can also become a per episode contributor, which basically you sign up through Patreon and you can do $1 an episode, $5 an episode, 10, 20, whatever you choose pretty much. And each level has different things that you get for that level. Some of them will even have early access to the podcast episodes. I believe that's like the $25 one. But anyways, the other thing you can do is simply shop on Amazon using my affiliate link. And basically the only thing you have to do on that, if you go to the support page there, you'll see where it says Amazon. Just copy right click on it and go copy the link and make that a bookmark. Make that your bookmark for Amazon, and you'll shop through my affiliate link. You won't see any difference in prices. There won't be any changes for you, but I will get a small finder's fee as well. I also have a Amazon shop set up that you can buy amateur radio stuff through. I have a couple of other affiliate links that are on the website now. MCM Electronics is on there, as well as All Batteries. I think I have one. I think I have that up. I'm working on updating some pages, getting some resource pages done, and I'm thinking about doing a couple of other things that I'm not going to say about right now, but I am working on that. So stay tuned in further episodes for some upcoming changes. And I guess that about wraps it up for this episode. Thank y'all very much for listening. Thank y'all for your continued support, whether it just listening or monetarily, or sharing with your friends. I greatly appreciate it. And I guess until next time, again, thank you to West Mountain Radio for your sponsorship. And I guess that's about it. So until next time, guys and gals, 73. This is K5CLM signing out.